Welcome to the Market.Sell.Win podcast. If your boss came to you tomorrow and asked you to find an advertising agency or new content management vendor, would you know how to find and select the right one? Shockingly, the internet is not always the answer to everything. Our guest, Mark Hudson, is an expert at preventing companies from making mistakes and drowning in the ocean of information on the internet when buying marketing services. He's figured out both the good and the bad ways of purchasing these services. Over the last 20 years, Mark has steadily built up his marketing procurement skills at some very familiar names like Walgreens and BP Amico. It's pretty obvious that at some point you will have to do your own form of marketing procurement because your company simply won't have the bandwidth, the resources, or the expertise to handle all of your marketing projects. I know that Mark's insights and information on the procurement process will be invaluable to you. In today's segment, we'll look at Mark's interesting ascent into the world of marketing procurement. In our other podcasts, Mark will give us an insider view of the procurement process, take us through the proposal process, and then walk through the essentials of the scoping process. Lots of process. With that as our backdrop, welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Well, thank you for being here. So I have to say, I am eager for our listeners to hear your career story because you have found your way into a rather unique field with procurement. So tell us, how did you get to where you are?
Well, yeah, so I guess I have to say I didn't plan to be in marketing procurement. My big dream was to be the next Darren Stevens from Bewitched. And be in advertising.
Love it.
Yeah. My, big advertising account executive. And so I'd have to say, even talking to my other peers in marketing procurement, they found this area by chance as well. So my path was far from a straight one. The agency, I kind of hit, through the years, I kind of hit everything. And then it all made sense to kind of flip to the procurement, the business of the commercial side of marketing, which would be considered procurement. I didn't want to move into finance, so I didn't want that financial aspect, but just, looking at what's best for the business is a good summary for what procurement tries to do.
So, that's interesting. So you were in advertising, and I mean, what? So tell me, how did you even make it into procurement? Was there like a position open or somebody said, you know what, you might be good at this?
Well, so kind of starting from the beginning, I had a degree in advertising with a minor in art. From there, I went out and wanted to go into advertising. So my first job to get my foot in the door, I got a job at AICOF, which is a direct response agency. And I was hired as a backup receptionist.
You know what? I was too. That's so funny. All right. Sorry. Go on. I digress.
Yeah, no. It's true. Getting your foot in the door was very important, especially, a couple decades back, maybe more than a couple. And it was so popular to be at an agency. You had to do something to just get in there. And then once you're in, you can move around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did do that. I moved from receptionist to media operations to, and then I realized I needed to do something different because I wasn't getting far enough in the agency world. So I flipped to corporate side and worked in production management and creative services. So it kind of started to build my resume of understanding all the aspects of the advertising world. So from there, I kind of moved from agency to, after the agency, I moved to Rand McNally, hat maker, and that's where I was working with production and creative services. From there, I moved back to the agency world, gave it another go, and worked in account management. But because I had a production background, I became, is it the jack of all trades or is it the jack of all skills? And
I've always said trades, but tomato, tomato.
Yeah, just because I did have the expertise in production, and then I was also account management, communication, engagement, and so forth. So it being in the account team at a small agency, I was able to touch a lot of things. And from there, that's where I met Julie Meegan.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yes,
Our
at
paths
the
have
Rosen Group.
crossed. That's right.
Yes, yes, you were my client, and one of my favorite clients, probably
Aw.
my favorite client.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you're only saying that, but go on.
Yeah. So then, from the agency world, I actually, so this is where it all flipped, and a headhunter called me and said, "Would you be interested in applying for a job in marketing procurement?" And I thought, "Why not?" Even though I didn't know what procurement was.
And by the way, as a sub comment, I think many of the people in our audience don't. So I'm so glad we're going to be talking about this in detail. But go on, headhunter calls.
Yeah, headhunter called and said, "Would you be interested in doing that?" So I figured it out. Procurement is procuring of, and marketing would be procuring of marketing and services. So it's basically, is it in buying services? But one thing that was interesting, it wasn't a tactical role that they were asking about. They wanted someone who was more strategic. So it wasn't just 3 bids and a buy. It was, let's understand the marketing category, see what's going on, and then do what needs to be done that will be the best advantage for the business. A little more than just I need a widget, and so I'll get 3 suppliers to give me bids.
Which is why all of your experience at that point made you really interesting, I would imagine.
Yes. So they had never. So I applied for this job at BP, and so they wanted to talk to me, and I talked about marketing. What I considered would be marketing procurement. Kind of used my communication skills, my account management skills, my understanding of production, my understanding of creative, and so forth. And they said, "That's what we need. We need someone who speaks the language of marketing, speaks the language of agency." Because we're not even getting our foot in the door with the marketing people. And we need someone who talks. We can teach you the details of procurement, but we just need somebody who can talk marketing. And so that's kind of how I started my career at BP. My 12 years at BP was being able to speak marketing. And so that's kind of where I was at. So I started as in marketing procurement at BP. I started with a U.S. role, kind of a full slate. So advertising, media, PR, production, kind of up and down, in-store, so forth. And then I moved into a global role that was a little more specific in categories. So I worked with advertising and media. And, and then I kind of moved into very specific to just media, or just advertising. And, so I was able to, how I advanced myself is being more global and being more specific in my category. So that's kind of where I got to, from there. And then I found an opportunity with Walgreens, which is now Walgreens Boots Alliance, global company. And, pretty much they wanted to have a subject matter expert that had global capacity and so forth. And I was able to kind of take my existing skills, do some U.S. work for Walgreens, and then and now I'm in the Walgreens Boots Alliance. So I'm working with all the markets that we deal with for media specific, but also agency relationships. So that was the world's fastest, from backup receptionist to global media procurement.
Exactly.
Lead.
Wow. All right. So since most of us don't know what it really means to do this job for a living, tell us, what's a day in the life look like?
Okay. So a day in the life is, I am, a day in life is like an adventure. It's different every day. I think one of the things that excites me about this job, and probably every job I've done, is that each day is an adventure. Each day is different. I'm working on some short-term things. I'm working on long-term strategies, like what should we be doing to better, the next 3 to 5 years of, better agency relationships, or, should we look at different models of our agencies and so forth. But so there's big stuff, and then at the same time, I'm fighting fires and tons of tactical execution. Working with, I'm the person who, hey, we can't get this PO through. I mean, it's everything from top to bottom.
Right.
So it's like, what are we going to do in the next 3 to 5 years, to improve the investment of our media funds, all the way down to the PO can't go through and the agency's yelling because they can't invoice. And they, per our contract, we need to have it done by this date. They have to input the invoice by this date or else. And so it's, which is kind of, understanding, that's, I guess, part of my day is that I constantly am referring back to the contract that we agree to with our relationship, our agencies. And so I have to say, we have to do this because the contract says so. Mm-hmm. So I'm always, I guess that's part of it, is managing compliance. So I guess I kind of talked all over the place, but that's what my day is I'm going from big topics to small topics to training to so forth. But what I'm really doing is looking out for marketing, and then the business above that, to assure that we're getting the best for our investment. Right now, specifically with media, I mean, I'm looking out for, we have, with our relationships, we have savings programs. So I have to make sure that the savings programs are set up and then they're executed so that the agency can deliver off of what the contract says. And so it's the ongoing relationship, it's ongoing tracking, it's ongoing auditing. So that's kind of what I do. At the same time, if there was a situation where I needed to, bid out something, if we needed a new fill in the blank supplier, I'd start the process with, well, what are your needs and this and that, and go through and identify a timeline. So it's a combination of doing work, engaging, and executing and planning.
So
that's a typical day. Sounds like a lot, but it is. It's not the same every day. I never wake up and say, oh, I'm going to do that again.
Right. Well, it's funny because I always thought on the marketing side that that was the same with my roles too. It's like no day is ever the same. So are you I would assume you're attached to the hip with your marketing folks or, whoever. I mean, you work for big companies, so the teams are huge, but is that a fair statement?
Yes. So I am connected to the media category. So I am connected with the media leads for each of our businesses. And also there may be some overarching, like the CMO. I mean, I don't connect with them, but he knows I'm there and I'm doing, I'm executing for his benefit and planning for his benefit. But for the most part, my, like the marketing directors and the media directors, I am connected hip to hip. We're talking daily. Mm-hmm. If there's, there's like, set a meeting, send an email, and then it goes to text, is the more like intimate relationship, mm-hmm. just because you're on all the time with that person. That's where I'm at, is right. That, somebody said, what was the budget number? What was the savings numbers for blah, blah, blah. And it comes in as a text. That's the level of engagement. And, it's pretty, close, mm-hmm. all the time.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
No. So that is, and that's kind of where it is. And I do have to attribute that a little bit to my background being at an agency, is that I understood client services, not that your marketing person is a client, you're a partner together, but you have to, the whole, I don't know if you remember, it's like you have to tell people what you're going to do, what you're doing, and then what you did.
Right.
You have to, communication and engagement is key. And it's not just sitting there doing an RFP in the corner. It's actually engaging with the people that you support, and they support you because you have you jointly have targets and goals.
Right. No, I totally get it. In fact, when you were describing it to me, it sounded like that client service relationship. I mean, I have a strong background in accounting marketing, and so my internal clients are accountants, so we are attached at the hip in terms of what we're doing to drive growth. And So it was interesting to hear you say that. But you touched on communication, which kind of leads me into my next question is, over your career, what have you found to be some of the top skills to be most valuable?
Yeah, well, communication is key. And as I said, it's, I've always said, and when I've had teams through the years, I've always said, if you want to be a good partner, you have to tell people what you're about to do, what you're doing, and what you did. Because if they find out that something happened and they weren't aware, you've lost the trust.
That's
And
right.
so communication is so key. And communication either internally, but also communication within with your agencies. I mean, you really have to develop a relationship with your agency. The agency finance teams, they are also hip to hip with. We're hip to hip. We're talking about what's going on, what's missing, what's scope, how do we fix this? We're having an issue with so and so, and so you have to make sure that you have that level of trust that they will say what they need to. Interestingly, I'm finding that through the years of experience, agencies will be very friendly to marketing clients, and they'll say exactly what they have to say to procurement. Or maybe just me, but that's what you need. That you need that in the total relationship. You need to have that level of communication somewhere, and if it's not happening to the client, it has to happen somewhere. So it happens with me. They say, we're really worried. We're not getting this information. We're not getting a signed scope, and our finance team lead is not going to let us go any further without it. It's like, got it. I'll go figure that out.
Right.
And so that's where communication is important. I think another area is capacity. As I said, there's so many different aspects that relate to procurement. I always talk about the toolkit of procurement. It's not just 3 bids and a buy. It's all the different ways that you can find efficiency and effectiveness with your marketing investment. So there's all different ways of looking at efficiency, and then you have to look at your company and identify how they defined like savings or efficiency or value, because each company has a different definition to live against. But capacity is just one day you could do like 50 different things, and you have to be able to like turn one off and go to the next one. Plate spinning, if you will.
That's a good visual.
Yeah, you have to make sure they all don't fall, and and there's many of them. And I think that once again, that goes back to account management. At an agency, is that you always have the capacity, because if you have multiple clients, multiple aspects, whether it's production, creative media, you have to actually make sure everything is running forward. So I think that's big. Strategic thinking. I mean, what I see sometimes is there's the tactical aspect, but then there's also the big picture. I always live with strategic thinking in my head. What is our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is to be, efficient or effective or a combination of both. And what's the more important? If one has to win, where do we be? So should we, have less agencies? Should we have more agencies because we want a roster and we want diversity in our view from our agencies? So all that is just understanding the business and then turning it into a procurement strategy, which should align with the business and marketing strategy. And I did add, I do have to say one more, which is resiliency. Procurement is hard. Some people don't like us, and they think that we're trying to steal their money or who knows what. And so you have to realize that somebody's going to say, no, you're wrong, and I hate you. And you just have to be able to go, okay, let's figure out plan B. And you have to get back on the horse. And sometimes it's many times that you have to be resilient, and you can't say, well, that didn't work, so now I'm done. You have to figure out a new way to come and address the conversation. One of my first experiences with marketing was a marketing lead at BP. She was somewhat skeptical.
She was skeptical, you said?
Skeptical, yeah, with me and procurement, and she really didn't want to deal with me or procurement in general, because they slow things down, they try to take your money, et cetera, all the typical myths. And then we started talking, and then I talked about this is what procurement can do for you. We want to work together, look at value, look at the marketplace, blah blah blah. And then there's this wine, then we talked about wine a little bit. And then we talked about white burgundies, that they're really good. And, they haven't gone on the cheap yet, like, Sutter Home. And then we talked about procurement value and how marketing procurement can work together. And then we talked about a wine shop on Belmont Avenue that would be great to visit. And then we talked about how we would have next steps for, working together, procurement and marketing. And she actually became my boss like 6 years later, and we had the best relationship throughout the 6 years, actually the 12 years of DT. And it all started with talking about procurement and wine.
Well, I think that just speaks to the fact that we're all people. So, finding some common ground and helps. It's like you weren't then, kind of on the other side. You were talking about something, a common interest, and that took down some of the guard. Maybe that was it. So, well, that's very cool. That is very cool. Well, so let me ask you another question in terms of the role of mentors. Have you had any mentors throughout your career?
Yeah, I actually, I did. And I think that one area that, communications is, I feel I'm a good communicator, but you can always do better. And then also as you grow in your career, the nuances start to be very important. How do you communicate to a executive level person versus, the junior person versus procurement versus marketing versus finance? Everybody wants to hear a different story, but it's the same story. You just have to tell it differently. Right. And actually the boss that I just spoken of, she was a great mentor. She used to talk about, she used to stop in the middle of conversations, say, "No, stop. That's not how you say that." And, it was great, but I had to have thick skin and be resilient because, I could have been upset, but I was like, wow, she's teaching me on the fly, how to be a better communicator. And it's like, one thing was put that pen down in your hand. Cause I talk a lot with my hands. But it was great. I mean, it was great to understand what you're doing. It's that whole list, listen to what you're saying when you're talking, know your audience, and read the room and, know your audience. And, it's the nuances that make you a better communicator. And she was just amazing for me, to build my skill set. And so I thought I did pretty well anyway. And then she kind of took it to this level. And we still talk, even though we've gone our separate ways. And we still talk about, remember that time, but also at the same time, how are things going? And, she'll give me suggestions, which is nice.
That's cool. I think what's really neat about that mentor is that she was in the room with you. So I've talked to a lot of folks where their mentors are people that they talk with and they see periodically, but they're not sitting in meetings with them all the time. So they don't get that direct feedback. Like, okay, like she said, stop holding the pen, and that's pretty cool because you don't find many people that are willing to give you that direct feedback or know you well enough to know why it's important. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, it really did help. And, it was in my communication in many ways too, because even with like a PowerPoint, she was like, she would look at some of my PowerPoints and say, "You're writing an executive PowerPoint. So there should be three, it basically think about the, back in college with the essay, 3 points and a close, open, 3 points and a close."
Right.
And if the executive person wants more, they'll ask, but get to the point. What are you trying to do? What's the rationale, the 3 points, and then how are you closing it? What do you want them to do? And it's like, that's it. And, so don't tell the long story, or at least put it in the appendix.
Right. Exactly. That's excellent feedback. I actually had a very similar conversation like that the other day with somebody who I'm like, you're talking at the 5,000 foot level to somebody who's operating at 100,000 foot level. You got to like bring it way up because they are not into all these details. They don't even know what you're talking about. So, Sage advice. All right. So if you had to flip back that switch, what would you have told yourself, your younger self, in terms of one piece of advice to do differently?
I think, well, differently or just expectation would be that, your career isn't a straight path, and that's okay. Be okay that you're not going to go just up the ladder. I was, post-college was, ladder success. Everybody has to, just climb. And, you may be a little more winding in your path, and you may find it more interesting because you're going to touch on a bunch of different things, and you'll find things that are really good and that you like, and do it. Do more of that. And then the things you don't really like, don't do them anymore.
Right.
Or, and especially don't put them on your resume because people will say,
that's right. They're going to pick up on that. That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. And so try things, refine, and hopefully cast up the things that are not your focus. And, so that's just, it's not a perfect straight path, and it's okay. And it may even be better for you as a person.
Well, I think that's the cool thing in your path is that, you really love what you do, and you wouldn't have even found it if you hadn't taken this winding path. So very, very good advice. All right. So even though you love what you do, you probably have a crappy day here and there. So what is the one song or group that really makes you shake it off?
Well, so I have to say, because I do this quite a bit, is I'll turn to my iPhone and turn it on and go to albums. And even though nothing's an album anymore, but what's the first album on my iPhone, which is ABBA, and first song is Dancing Queen. So you have to smile when you're listening to Dancing Queen from ABBA.
How could you not? I totally agree. I got it going through my head right now, but I'll spare the audience some singing. Well, thank you so much. That was so interesting just to hear your twisty, windy path. And really, I think what's helpful is for our listeners to hear from real people with their, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And hopefully, they take some of your advice and are able to use that in their own career. So thanks for joining us.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.